Prem se Gopal Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Jai Gaura Sri Sri Hare Krishna Prabhu Shama Kanda Radha Pati Giri Govardhani Jai Sri Vrindavan Jai Jai Gam Ramana Tulsi Bhakti Devi Jai Nanda Hari Vaishnava Jai Sadavata Bhakti Devi Jai Nandi Lord Sri Samoda Bhakti Lord Sri Samoda Bhakti Lord Sri Samoda Bhakti Lord Sri Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya 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 Srimad Krishna Sattva Shri Bhaktivedanta Swami Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Prachadane Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Srimad Bhagavatam Shri Sukha Uvacha Itam Acharan Kama Saitan Acharan Kama Straino Bhanam Atmanah Buddha Priyaya Nirvino Buddha Priyaya Nirvino Gatam Ekam Agayata Shri Sukha Uvacha Saitam Acharan Kama Straino Bhanam Atmanah Buddha Priyaya Nirvino Gatam Ekam Agayata Shri Sukha Uvacha Saitam Acharan Kama Straino Bhanam Atmanah Buddha Priyaya Nirvino Gatam Ekam Agayata Shri Sukha Uvacha Saitam Acharan Kama Straino Bhanam Atmanah Buddha Priyaya Nirvino Gatam Ekam Agayata Shri Sukha Uvacha Saitam Acharan Kama Straino Bhanam Atmanah Buddha Priyaya Nirvino Gatam Ekam Agayata Shri Sukha Uvacha Shri Sukadeva Goswami said Maharaj Yadi
done this way,
Acharan behaving Kama
in regard to lusty desires,
Shrina
very much attached to women,
Apana woman, counteraction, Atmanaha, of his own welfare, Buddha,
understanding with intelligence,
unto his beloved wife,
disgusted, story. This is
Agayata, narrated.
Translation: Sukadeva Goswami said that Maharaj Parikshit was very much attached to woman. In due course of time, however, when discussed with sexual enjoyment and its bad effects, he renounced this way of life and narrated the following story to his beloved wife. My dear beloved daughter of a secret child, in this world there was someone exactly like me. Please listen as I narrate the history of his life. By hearing about the life of such a householder, one are those who have retired from household life, always lament. Persons who live in the village of Chandrika, Grama, Namasi, and those who live in the forest are called Vanavasi or Vanavasa. The vanaprasthas who have retired from family life never lament about their past family life because of engaged in trying to fulfill lusty desires. Prahlad Maharaj said that one should retire from family life as soon as possible and describe family life as the darkest well. If one continually or permanently concentrates on living with his family, he should be understood to be killing himself. In the Vedic civilization, therefore, it is recommended that one retire from family life at the end of his 50th year and go to the vana of the forest. When he becomes expert or accustomed to forest life or retired life as a vanaprastha, he should accept sannyas. Vanam gato yatari ashrayeta. Sannyas means accepting unalloyed engagement in the service of the Lord. Vedic civilization therefore recommends 4 different stages of life: brahmachari, grihastha, vanaprastha, and sannyas. One should be very much ashamed of remaining a householder and not promoting oneself to the 2 higher stages, namely vanaprastha and sannyas. So here we see that Yayati, after so long, 1,000 years, realized that he was wasting his time and that family life was a little bit of a problem. So he regretted his previous years, his 1,000 years spending in household life, and then he told this story to his wife, which is just actually an explanation of his own life, or people in general who become too attached. So, as I said previously, there's an arrangement within the varnashram system for retirement. So we have different formal stages of life called ashramas: brahmacharya ashram, grihastha ashram, vanaprastha ashram, and sannyasa ashram. However, not everybody takes all of these ashrams. So the sudras just become grihasthas, one ashram. The others, the Vaishyas and the Kshatriyas, can take 3 ashrams, and the Brahmanas take 4. So that is the ideal situation. So there is a limit on what one can do according to qualification. So because the Brahmins are steadier in controlling the senses, they can take sannyas, whereas the Vaishyas and Kshatriyas are not so steady by their very nature, so therefore they go up to vanaprastha, which is somewhat similar, but they don't have to renounce their life. But they should do austerities. And the Sudras aren't qualified for anything. They can't study the Vedas and they can't renounce at all. So they just take grihastha life. In this way, there is a limitation on, according to Varna, on how far you can progress spiritually in one sense in terms of renunciation. The Sudras can't do anything. They're stuck with their attachments. Because if they're Tamogun, generally they can't get those attachments out anyway, so then they're stuck in that position. And the others are allowed a certain degree in Brahmins the most. And so that's the Varna system in cooperation with the ashrams. So not everybody can go through all the ashramas. The Sudras are not qualified for brahmacharya ashram, they need to study the Vedas. So therefore there is some limit on how far people can go according to Varna. So in one sense we can say this limits spiritual life in the sense of getting detached from material life. It is that far it is limited by Varna. So the large section of the society who are Sudras can't do anything. So that's a fault of the system that it doesn't allow for much progress for the Sudras at all, who are the majority of the society. Of course, we can also argue the opposite. Well, anyway, the Sudras would be interested in renouncing. So why encourage them to do something they're not qualified for or interested in at all? So that's the system. If we go to the bhakti, however, we find it's quite different. Everybody can do bhakti. How is it possible? And it is possible because through the process of bhakti, everybody surpasses the gunas. So that is the whole idea behind what we call the second initiation. If you get second initiation, you're superior to a brahmana, no matter how you were born or what guna you were in. So by getting the mantra, then you're a Vaishnava. And automatically you are superior to a brahmana. So therefore, you can take a brahman thread and do whatever a brahman does. So therefore, the Vaishnava is a flexible position that can operate in any varna or any guna. So that is therefore a more practical system, especially for Kali Yuga in terms of spiritual advancement. In terms of course, going for Artha, Dharma, Kama, and Moksha, this up to liberation, of course, then that varnashram system is okay. Those people in the lower modes definitely are not qualified to renounce at all. And because the system operates and purifies very slowly, and it takes them many births to progress. So there's justification there. The process of bhakti, on the other hand, can give immediate purification, immediate destruction of karmas and gunas. And therefore, the Vaishnava immediately becomes superior to the Brahmana. This, of course, is a little revolutionary as far as traditional thought is concerned. But we see the statements in the Bhagavatam confirm this. And these are quoted in the Nectar of Ocean concerning klesha, or destruction of karma. So there it is mentioned that bhakti destroys parabdha karmas, aparabdha karmas, both types. And of course desires, the great karmas, and avidya, which is the source of desire, which is the very root of all suffering in the material world. So all of these are destroyed by the process of bhakti. So then in relation to parabdha karma, it is said that your birth is your parabdha karma. So if you're born as a Sudra or born as a Brahman, that's your parabdha karma. So the traditional view is that cannot be changed. Your parabdha karma is never changed. No matter what you do in your activities this life. Your parabdha karma is that. Therefore, you cannot change your status in varna. If you're born a Sudra, you are a Sudra throughout your life, no matter what activities you do. If you're a Kshatriya, you remain as Kshatriya, and you can't go beyond that. And of course, the Bhagavad Gita says, don't do the activities of a different varna, do the activities of your particular varna. Otherwise, you fail. Either by you're not qualified to do the superior activities, and you're too lazy if you just do the inferior activities. So, therefore, the system encourages sticking to karma and acting within that, which implies that you cannot go beyond your gunas in this lifetime. You're stuck. So your qualities are fixed in certain gunas, mixtures of gunas, sattva, rajas, tamas, or moksha. That is the implication of that. And that is the traditional view. And therefore, the people operate within these varnas. They marry within varnas, they do their activities within their varnas, etc. But then, Bhakti says that no, the process of Bhakti destroys your parabdha karma. So therefore, if you take your devotional service, you destroy your gunas, you destroy your varna. They're all gone. And as Prabhupada quoted earlier, that he who performs Bhakti surpasses the gunas. Samatitya, completely surpasses the gunas. So, that may be questioned. But we see the Bhagavatam confirms this. And this is quoted in the Nectar of Devotion by Bhanu Swami. And there's some verses. One of the verses is that if one meditates on the lotus feet of the Lord, or chants the name of the Lord once, the Chandala is qualified to do it so yagya. You see, a sacrifice that only Brahman is qualified to do immediately, the Chandala is qualified for that. Okay? So the explanation there, that's given in relation to the bhakti destroys corrupted karmas. Okay? So the explanation is that the Chandala status was due to karma. So that's his present birth. He's born with this status as a Chandala, that's a corrupted karma. It generally cannot be changed. But bhakti destroys corrupted karma. So by meditating on the lotus feet of the Lord, or chanting the Lord's name, he immediately surpasses the status of a Chandala and is qualified for whatever Brahmana can do, which means that his corrupted karma has been destroyed. So that's given as a proof that corrupted karma has destroyed. In spite of the fact that generally the attitude is very conservative in the system itself, don't change their status. So, therefore, this is a little bit revolutionary in terms of traditional views. But this is right in the Bhagavatam itself. One is immediately beyond the gunas simply by the process of bhakti. So the prabhupada karmas are destroyed, and of course, aprabhupada karmas are also destroyed. And beyond that, desires are destroyed, and beyond that, ignorance is destroyed. All these are destroyed. So, therefore, the process of bhakti operates completely differently from the other systems. You have to have in the Varnashram basically this qualification in the gunas itself and doing things in the gunas. So technically, you can't get beyond the gunas by that. The bhakti itself is beyond the gunas, and by performing bhakti, you go beyond the gunas. The only problem is that how can a person in the gunas do an activity beyond the gunas? This is the peculiar problem that arises. How is it possible? Huh? So, therefore, we come to the qualification for bhakti. Okay? So the qualification for bhakti is not that you have to be near guna as such, beyond the gunas. In other words, you have to be beyond the Brahmana at the point of liberation or whatever. No. Okay? The qualification is shraddha, or faith, which we say in Islam can say is beyond the gunas because it is accepted as the Supreme Lord, which is a type of knowledge, which is beyond the gunas. So, of course, that doesn't mean one is completely beyond the gunas because one still has desires, karma, etc. to deal with. But qualification is acceptance of the Supreme Lord. Okay? So that very acceptance in the jiva permits the performance of nirguna bhakti. Of course, because of our contamination, we can cover the bhakti, so to speak, and have mixed bhakti or bhakti avas, namavas, etc. But the process of bhakti itself is pure. It is beyond the gunas. We that will contaminate with various ideas or whatever. So, therefore, if we are in the gunas, but we do have that faith, that qualifies us for the process of bhakti. We can ask why, since one is not completely beyond the gunas, how can you do it even with the faith? Why that is allowed? And we can say that this is actually the mercy of the Lord. It is nirguna, but it's not only nirguna, it is actually part of the Supreme Lord's Sarup Shakti, Vladimir and Samvit Shakti. So it's not just something nirguna like in Brahman. It's part of the Supreme Lord. And its basic component is mercy of the Lord. So it's ultimately it is because of the mercy of the Lord that bhakti can be performed by any person in any circumstance, in any guna, in spite of the fact that it's nirguna. Mercy of the Lord. That is not so for the other processes. They don't have the direct mercy of the Lord. They are in the gunas. They're not nirguna. Karma yoga is not nirguna. Jnana yoga is not nirguna. They're sattva. So that is the basic difference. So, therefore, one of the initial types of knowledge we have is that we must distinguish the process of bhakti, worship of the Lord, in its various forms and in the various senses, from all the other processes. And because of that, because of its unique position, the same rules do not apply. So here we have limitations based upon gunas and varna. Only certain ashramas are allowed, and the renunciation is only allowed ultimately for the brahmana. So that is the system of karma yoga and jnana yoga. But these same rules do not apply to bhakti yoga. Shraddha is a qualification, and anyone, if they get the shraddha, then they can practice the bhakti and destroy their goods, go beyond goods. And that can be immediately, as we see in the case of the Bhagavatam, the person, the Chandala, who chants the name of the Lord once purely or meditates on the Lord purely, then qualified to do whatever Brahmana does. All of those karmas are gone, the proper karmas are gone. So, very, very revolutionary process as far as the traditional view is concerned. So, of course, we find that how to implement this becomes a real problem because of the conservative view of society. So therefore we found that it wasn't really implemented much in ancient times. And Lord Chaitanya himself did not disturb that system. So he operated within the system, despite of condemning varnashram system. He took sannyas, followed all the rules of sannyasashram. A lot of his associates were Brahmins. They followed the Brahminical rules, household life or whatever they were in, like that. If they were Vaishyas, they followed Vaishya life. Follow the system. And they didn't all say, okay, we're beyond all this, and then reject the whole system and go off and, like Vairagis, like Nityananda or something. They didn't do that. They operated within the system, so they didn't disturb that system. So, in spite of the fact that provision is there that bhakti is beyond and destroys all the gunas, and you're beyond the varnashram system. Generally, the devotees did not do that. Lord Chaitanya also didn't do it. He didn't disturb the system and operated within that system more or less. But then we see that at the same time, exceptional cases are there. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself would eat in the house of someone like Subhuti Rai in Mathura, even though he was an outcast, and no one should eat with sannyasi should not eat in his house or whatever like that. And he associated with Haridas Thakur, who was technically Lacha. Shouldn't have been near him. He touched him. He touched his feet. He honored him. He worshipped him. Shouldn't have done that. But he did. And same with Advaitacharya. He was very friendly with Haridas Thakur. And he shouldn't even, approach him or look at him, technically in Brahminical society. But he did. So, in one sense, they did go beyond the social norms of that time to some degree. But as for actually taking the Chandala and putting him in a high position of doing whatever a Brahmana could do, they never ever did that. So it is therefore a little revolutionary when Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati actually did that. and he gave the mantra and he gave the thread, Upanayana, to all of the people who were qualified for Diksha. So that was simply an implementation of this verse that one who meditates on the lotus feet of the Lord or chants the name of the Lord once purely, then he becomes qualified to do the sacrifices like a Brahman. So that was the practical, so this is maybe one of the first times that was done, where otherwise it was not really practiced much. So it became a little bit revolutionary in that sense. But simply implementing what was there in the scriptures. So that is the evolution of this idea of the strength of bhakti and how it works beyond the material gunas, etc. So here we have the case of Yayati Maharaj. He realized his mistake after 1,000 years. Took him a long time to realize that, but after 1,000 years he began to lament his position. And then he tells this whole story about household life and who regrets it later on after he retires and becomes a vanaprastha or whatever. So this is you can say, a gradual process. He was in household like 1,000 years and then decided that I should renounce after that period. That system is there, the varnashram system. Technically, according to the rules, one should renounce household life at the age of 50. Or in another place, one says when your hair gets white or gray. Or another place, when you have grandchildren. And so we have three basic alternatives there for taking vanaprastha. If one is, of course, higher varna. So these are the provisions for renouncing and going off to vanaprastha. So vanaprastha is, you can say, the intermediate stage of renunciation. Giving up the family members, except the wife, and giving up the house and all society, etc., and living in the forest, living alone, and doing austerities. So the emphasis in vanaprastha life is austerity, to renounce all of the previous attachments that accrue due to living in the family. Why intermediate stage? Because it takes time to get detachment. Develop attachment from family members. So that's allowed. And if one is qualified as a brahmana, then one can go further and renounce their wife also and just live alone. And then the main activity of the sannyas life is to meditate on the Supreme Lord. Complete concentration on the Supreme Lord. So we can say that is technically the most spiritual stage, whereas the vanaprastha is getting rid of the attachments by austerities, renunciation, etc. Of course, for the Vaishnava who operates within the varnashram system, then these divisions are not so crucial, or whatever. One can operate within the varnashram system and simultaneously do the process of bhakti. So, whether one takes the different ashramas or not doesn't really matter. The measure of success is not renunciation, but attachment to the lotus of the Lord. So, therefore, the Lord Chaitanya considered these ashramas external, varna and ashramas external measurements of progress. And more important is the surrender to the Lord. So to measure that, that's how we gauge progress. And it doesn't depend necessarily upon the external category of a person, whether he's a brahmana, kshatriya, vaishya, sudra, or sannyasi, vanaprastha, etc. So therefore, Lord Chaitanya said the main emphasis is to perform bhakti. And one can do that whether one was a householder or a vanaprastha or a sannyasi or a brahmachari, it doesn't matter. That is the main thing. And all this other, the varnas, ashramas, are secondary considerations. And therefore Lord Chaitanya honored all of his devotees. He didn't honor the brahmana more than the sudra or the vacha. He honored Haridas Thakur as the acharya, who was not even in the varnashram system. And in terms of ashrama, most of his associates were grihasthas, and they stayed grihasthas throughout their life. And there were a few sannyasis at his time. Therefore, the important aspect is surrender to the Supreme Lord with less emphasis upon the development of ashramas and varnas, etc. Because implication is that the detachment that takes place through the progress of the ashrama automatically takes place with the development of bhakti. So one can do intense bhakti as a grihastha, he can attain the same detachment as a vanaprastha or sannyasi. without going through those ashramas, you can attain the same type of detachment. So therefore, the emphasis upon the practice of bhakti itself, and one can or cannot, doesn't matter, use the ashramas as well. So in general, as you say, the Gaudians, they remained grihasthas. There was not much of the sannyas ashram after Lord Chaitanya. And most of the people were grihasthas. Practiced their bhakti as grihasthas. But then again, it can be useful. The different ashramas can be useful. Lord Chaitanya took sannyas. He had some sannyasis around him. So there's no prohibition for the different ashramas also for the Gaudiyas, in spite of the fact that later on it fell out of use. The compensation was Babajis, who were like sannyasis, but we could say superior to sannyasis because they give up even sannyasa dharma in the sense of connection with the varnashram system. So that was kind of an equivalent. So in any case, the practices of the varnashram system can be there as long as they are supporting the devotional life and in no way an impediment. So therefore I think it can be practiced alone, not necessarily rejected. But the emphasis is upon the bhakti.
What I say is, in the varnashram system, there are four particularly ashramas like Brahmana, Kshatriya and Vaishya. If someone is in the varnashram system, what is the hope for the future? Because he is not allowed to do any activities of visual and anything. What is the hope for him? What is the hope for him?
In terms of ashrama, not much because he has to stay at grihastha. His hope is to be a devotee. Everybody can do devotion. That's his saving for the Sudra. Or the Malesha. What's the hope of the Malesha? Nothing. You can't even do what the Sudra can do. Or the hope for everybody is bhakti. So that's a universal process. It's much more flexible than the varnashram system.
See, we see that, we have seen that in the Manta Shabda Bhanam budget, one should retire from human life after 50 years. But this is applicable only to the Kali Yuga and other yugas, because these 50 years, that is in Kali Yuga you can count, and not the other yugas you can count.
Well, it is the Smriti Shastras. I don't know whether it's meant specifically for Kali Yuga, but I suppose it's generally that is Kali Yuga because people live longer in other yugas, I suppose. But then the other thing is when your hair grows big or when you have grandchildren. So.
And this, I have read this chapter extended, even this Yoyati, he took sannyas also.
Who?
Yoyati.
Yeah.
He took sannyas also. But normally for the Kshatriya there is no sannyas, sannyas is the Brahmana.
Yeah, generally it's Vanaprastha.
Yeah.
Did he take sannyas?
Yeah, I see that.
It actually says he took sannyas and such.
Because he may have underwent 100,000 years of suffering.
Is it in the summary,
Oh, but you may have to be careful there. This is maybe renunciation. I don't know if you look at the actual text. He got liberation apparently later on.
So that he took up one person.
Yeah, see.
Sannyasi. Text. It's an introduction summary.
So text.
The summary.
Summary.
The summary,
So
last part.
The summary is last part.
Last part of the chapter.
Like mendicant or sannyasi?
Mendicant or sannyasi.
Yeah, but that doesn't say that in the text itself. I don't know what I'm saying. He returned his youth. He gave himself. He divided his kingdom up. And then having enthroned many years, but he gave it up as the bird flies from the nest.
Just
It just says he's freed from the modes of nature and he ultimately attained the supreme. It doesn't really say what happened. No, it doesn't say.
Summary is it is like only one word. They're taking this.
Yeah, but I'm saying if you go to the actual text, it looks different. It doesn't say, it just says he attained the Lord. He gave up his kingdom and attained the Lord. In that sense, he's sannyas, he gave up everything, but it doesn't say whether he did vanaprastha actually. No, it doesn't say.
Maharaj, Babaji being above the Varnashrama, beyond the Varnashrama, and still Babaji can also practice devotional service. So then why we do not have that concept in the song?
Babaji? Well, there could be, technically. I think there was one Babaji when Prabhupada was around or something like that, one or two. They didn't make it ultimately. I know they disappeared. And Bhaktisiddhanta had several Babajis also. So it is there, but we can say because it is a sense of renunciation and less concentration on preaching, and sitting in Radhakund or something like that, it's not so practical for a preaching movement. So then Prabhupada had, and of course Bhaktisiddhanta introduced sannyas as a more practical measure where you stay in the ashram and preach and things like that, I suppose. How to control anger, how to deal with rajasic family members. Well, one is endurance. We have to tolerate everybody. Be humble as a blade of grass, more tolerant than a tree. How to control anger. So, of course, anger is an aspect of what? Frustration because of desire. So, anger is simply a byproduct of kama. So we have to control kama. And the Vaishnava way of doing that is to develop attraction for the Lord. Then we have less attraction for material things. So in other words, by the practice of bhakti itself, we should develop more interest in the Lord and less attraction for matter.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Yeah, in this purport, Maharaja Prahlada said that one should give up his family as soon as possible. So that means
Yeah, don't get married And if he is married, then he has to fulfill his responsibilities of providing for the wife and children, etc., etc., etc. Once that's finished, then he can take some years. So there may be some years then that as soon as maybe take 20 or 30 years if he gets married.
and what is the Kaitava Dharma? Kaitava Dharma.
Kaitava Dharma is everything other than bhakti. Karma yoga, Jnana yoga, Sangha yoga, any other system of religion or whatever, as long as it's not bhakti.
That's the reason before proper guidance, people may mistake Shastra and give up family members. Because Shastra they should do.
Yeah.
How they going to be?
It is recommended that one undergo vanaprastha ashrama perhaps austerity. His question is ISKCON have been followed to those who directly take sannyas. Yeah, that is to go to vanaprastha to sannyas is the general thing, but Scripture says gives three alternatives: sannyas from brahmacharya, sannyas from grihastha, or sannyas from vanaprastha, provided one is qualified. So there's three alternatives.
I think that ISKCON we are more qualified that we can take the military sannyas.
Well, Prabhupada did it, that's all.
So the followers are more than other
Generally, it is, probably it's, at the present moment, it's maybe 50-50. Half of those who took sannyas were previously married, I think. I don't know the statistics are now, but half were married before, half weren't married. So it was half. In the beginning, it was more, this brahmacharis became sannyasas under Prabhupada. As time changed and the whole system's changed somewhat. And then if in taking sannyas, then generally they don't allow until one is about 50 years old. So if you apply when you're 40, you wait 10 years. A waiting period of 10 years or whatever like that. So generally they apply after they're 45, so they get a 5-year waiting list, something like that. That's the general. Of course, some people took it earlier, but in the early days, no. Because Prabhupada, the senior devotees were only in the movement for maximum 10 years when he disappeared. So they took sannyas after 5 years in the movement. A lot of people. So that they're very young. Most of them are before 30 years old or something like that. So very problematic. So that's why a lot of them fail.
What's the fastest sannyas that he gave, Maharaj? Srila Prabhupada?
Fastest?
Earliest.
I don't know about earliest. Maybe a few years, like Bhakti Swami, maybe it was 2 years in the movement or something. 1 year, 2 years in the movement. Very quickly they got it. And there's a few like that. Very quickly they got it.
How the Kirtan Swami?
No, that was sometime. I don't know.
Well, 4 things which is avoided in Kali-yuga. Leadership is also a 4 different things in Kali-yuga.
Yeah, that's a general provision, but we see all the Vaishnava Sampradayas and Shankar also have sannyas. So Bhaktisiddhanta says what is forbidden is karma sannyas, that we give up all action completely and we just renounce everything. So if one is doing devotional service, obviously that is permissible.
Grantara Sri Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srimad Bhanu Maharaj ki jai. Sri Prabhupada ki jai.